Sometimes a game launches and, well, it ain't pretty. Maybe it's full of bugs, missing features, or just straight up not what people were expecting. Players rage, reviews tank, and it looks like the game is dead on arrival. But every now and then, a game pulls off a comeback story. The devs stick with it, fix the problems, and turn it into something freaking amazing. So today we're talking about 10 games that launched with a big ol' mess, but over time became absolute bangers. Whether it was through updates, expansions, or just straight up community support, these games went from disasters to must-plays. If you skipped them at launch, now's the time to give them another shot. Let's get into it. No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky might be the biggest comeback story in gaming history. When it first dropped in 2016, people thought it was going to be the greatest space game ever, like endless planets, crazy alien life, massive space battles, pure sci-fi adventure. But then the game actually came out and, yeah, it was bad. It was empty, repetitive, and missing half the stuff the trailers made people believe would be there. No multiplayer, no real variety, no real reason to keep playing. People were pissed, reviews were brutal. It was a disaster. But here's the wild thing, the devs didn't give up. A lot of studios would have just moved on, maybe dropped 1 or 2 updates and called it a day, but Hello Games kept going, and not just little bug fixes, they started dropping massive updates, one after another. It took years, but over time, they completely rebuilt the game into something incredible. Now, No Man's Sky is exactly what people wanted it to be. You could explore, build bases, go underwater, fly between galaxies, trade, fight space battles, even team up with friends in multiplayer. There's even VR support now, so you can literally step into the world. They added mechs, freaking sandworms, better alien life, and way more depth to everything. The planets feel alive now with cool weather effects, dangerous creatures, and unique stuff to discover. And the best part? The updates just keep coming. If you tried this game at launch and hated it, I don't blame you. But if you haven't touched it in a few years, it's a whole different experience now. What started as a huge letdown has turned into one of the best space exploration games ever, and honestly, it just keeps getting better. Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 had one of the most hyped launches in gaming history. Years of trailers, crazy promises, and Keanu Reeves himself telling us we were breathtaking. It was supposed to be the ultimate RPG. But when it finally dropped in 2020, oh man, it was a freaking mess. The game was buggy as hell. We're talking characters T-posing through walls, cars flying for no reason, NPCs acting like they forgot how to exist, and if you played on last-gen consoles, forget about it. The game barely ran, the frame rate tanked, textures wouldn't load, and crashes were constant. It was bad. So bad that Sony straight up pulled the game from the PlayStation Store. That almost never happens. But here's the thing, CD Projekt Red didn't abandon ship. They spent years fixing the game, patching out bugs and adding in the depth that people expected. And the turning point? Update 2.0 and the Phantom Liberty expansion.
Let's go out and play.
Now, Cyberpunk 2077 is freaking amazing. It finally delivers on the whole living, breathing cyberpunk world fantasy. The AI actually works, the combat is smoother, driving feels better, and the RPG systems actually matter. The cops won't just randomly teleport behind you anymore, they'll actually chase you down like it's freaking GTA. And the story? It always had one of the best narratives in gaming, but now it feels like the full package. With all the updates, Cyberpunk 2077 is finally the game people were hoping for. It went from being a meme about broken games to one of the best RPGs of this generation. If you skipped it because of a launch mess, now's the time to jump in. It took a while, but Night City is finally worth visiting. Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV didn't just have a bad launch, it had one of the worst launches in gaming history. Like, we're talking so bad that Square Enix straight up shut the whole game down and rebuilt it from scratch. Yeah, that bad. Back in 2010, when the game first released, people were pissed. The world was lifeless, the UI was a nightmare, the combat felt stiff, and everything just felt broken. Even basic stuff like questing was a pain in the ass. The backlash was brutal, critics tore it apart, fans were furious, and Square Enix knew they had completely screwed up. But instead of abandoning it, they did something crazy. They brought in a new director, Naoki Yoshida, aka Yoshi-P, and he made a bold decision, kill the game and start over. In 2012, they literally wiped the world off the map in a massive in-game event where a freaking dragon god destroyed everything. Then, in 2013, they launched Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, a completely new game built from the ground up, and holy crap, what a turnaround. FF14 is now one of the best MMOs ever made. The world is huge, beautiful, and packed with content. The combat is fun and deep, the story is one of the best in Final Fantasy history, and the expansions, they just keep making it better. It went from being a joke to an absolute masterpiece, and now it's one of the most successful MMORPGs of all time. If you love story-driven MMOs, amazing boss fights, and just a massive living world to get lost in, FF14 is a must-play. It's proof that even the biggest failures can turn into something legendary. Fallout 76. Fallout 76 launched in 2018, and man, it was a disaster. Bethesda tried to take the beloved Fallout series online, but instead of a fun multiplayer wasteland adventure, what we got was a broken, empty world full of bugs, crashes, and straight-up bad design. At launch, there were no human NPCs, just robots and holotapes telling you about stuff that already happened. Not exactly the immersive RPG experience people wanted. The game was also glitchy as hell. Players were falling through the map, enemies wouldn't take damage, and the servers struggled to keep up. And don't even get me started on the whole bag gate controversy where Bethesda sold a $200 collector's edition with a cheap nylon bag instead of the nice canvas one they promised. It was a train wreck. But here's the thing, Fallout 76 is actually good now. Bethesda stuck with it, and over the years they've added a ton of new content, NPCs, quests, and proper RPG choices. The Wastelanders update was the big turning point, bringing back human characters and making the game feel like a real Fallout experience. Since then, they've kept adding new storylines, new locations, and even full Brotherhood of Steel content. Now, Fallout 76 actually feels like a proper Fallout game. You can play solo or with friends, explore a massive open world, build your own settlements, and take on big mutant creatures in events. The community is super active, and there's always something going on. If you skipped it because of the launch mess, now's a great time to jump in. It's not perfect, but it's gone from a nuclear disaster to one of the best comeback stories in gaming. Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 was supposed to be the next big thing in multiplayer shooters. Massive maps, huge battles, futuristic gadgets, it all sounded awesome, but when the game actually launched in 2021, it was a freaking disaster. The game was unfinished, broken, and straight up missing key Battlefield features. No scoreboard at launch, no voice chat, no server browser, basic stuff just wasn't there. The maps were way too big and empty, vehicles felt overpowered, and the new specialist system, fans freaking hated it. Plus, let's not forget the bugs, tanks flying, hit detection not working, and servers struggling to keep up. It was rough. But here's the thing, DICE actually turned it around. Over the past couple of years, they've been steadily fixing the game with massive updates. They reworked the maps, balanced vehicles, brought back classic Battlefield classes, and improved the movement and gunplay. They even added full-on destruction in some areas, making battles feel way more dynamic. Now, Battlefield 2042 is actually fun. It feels like a proper Battlefield game with crazy, chaotic battles, great teamwork, and tons of explosive moments. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was at launch. If you wrote it off before, now's the time to jump back in. Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity had one of the worst launches in Ubisoft history. When it dropped in 2014, people were hyped. It was the first true next-gen Assassin's Creed with insane crowd sizes, crazy detailed Paris streets, and a co-op mode where you and your friends could team up for assassinations. It was supposed to be the ultimate assassin experience, but instead, you know what happens? The game was so broken at launch that it became a meme. Characters' faces straight up disappeared, leaving just creepy floating eyes and mouths. NPCs would clip through walls, your assassin would get stuck in random places, and sometimes the game would just crash for no reason. And the performance? Terrible. Even the best PCs struggled to keep up, and on consoles, it ran like hot garbage. People were mad. Ubisoft even had to apologize and give out free DLC because of how bad it was. But here's the wild part. Unity today is actually really freaking good. Ubisoft didn't just abandon it, they spent months patching it, fixing the bugs, improving performance, and making sure the game actually worked. And now, it's one of the most unique AC games in the whole series.
sors cette...
The parkour system is still one of the best in any Assassin's Creed game. You can climb, run, and flip through Paris like a real assassin in a way that just feels so smooth. The world, still stunning. Ubisoft didn't hold back when recreating revolutionary France, and to this day, it's one of the most detailed and alive open worlds they've ever made. The crowds, the buildings, the interiors, it all feels real. Even the stealth? Better than most modern AC games. Instead of just hacking away with RPG-style combat, you actually have to think like an assassin. If you gave up on Unity back when it was a buggy disaster, now's the time to try it again. It went from being a mess to one of the most underrated AC games ever, and honestly, it might just have the best version of Assassin's Creed's classic gameplay we'll ever get. Batman Arkham Knight. Batman Arkham Knight was supposed to be the epic finale to the Arkham series. A massive Gotham, the freaking Batmobile, and a darker, more intense story. It sounded like a dream, but if you played it on PC at launch, that dream turned into a nightmare real quick. The PC version of Arkham Knight was a complete disaster. I'm talking unplayable levels of bad. The game was locked at 30 FPS, which is already ridiculous for a high-budget PC release. PCs are all known for having options, and locking 30 FPS for the PC masters is crazy work. But you know, even worse, it barely even hit that. The game stuttered like crazy, textures wouldn't load, and people with high-end graphics cards were still getting frame drops into the single digits. And don't even think about playing it on a weaker system, it just wouldn't work. It got so bad that Warner Brothers actually pulled the game from sale on Steam. That almost never happens. People were furious, and rightly so. Rocksteady had delivered banger after banger with the Arkham series, but this time, they completely dropped the ball. When the game finally came back after months of fixes, it was better, but the damage was done. But here's the thing, Arkham Knight today is actually fantastic. After tons of patches, the performance is solid, the game runs smoothly, and it looks insanely good, even years later. Gotham is massive, alive, and dripping with atmosphere. The combat is still some of the best in any action game, and once you get used to the Batmobile, it's actually pretty fun, except for those endless tank battles, but hey, nothing's perfect. And the story is one of the best in the series. Seeing Batman push to his absolute limits, dealing with Scarecrow's fear toxin, and that twist with the Arkham Knight, it hits hard. And let's be real, gliding around Gotham taking down criminals like a total badass never gets old. So yeah, Arkham Knight's launch was a mess, but the game itself, freaking incredible. If you skipped it because of the PC disaster, it's 100% worth playing now. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodline. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is one of those games that was way ahead of its time, but also kind of broken when it came out. It dropped in 2004, right alongside Half-Life 2, and let's just say it got buried. But the real problem, the game was a buggy, unfinished mess. At launch, Bloodlines was straight up broken. Quests glitched out, AI would just stop working, animations were janky, and some mechanics straight up didn't function properly. It was also one of the first games to run on Valve's new Source engine, and hoo boy, that didn't help. The game had horrible performance issues even on good PCs, and since the publisher rushed it out the door, huge chunks of content were missing. But despite all that, Bloodlines was freaking special. It had this deep, choice-driven RPG story that sucked you in like a fresh bag of blood. The different vampire clans let you play in totally unique ways, whether you were a smooth-talking mastermind, a savage brute, or a creepy Nosferatu skulking through the sewers. Every choice mattered, dialogue was some of the best in gaming, and the world just felt so alive and mysterious. It wasn't just another RPG, it was a full-blown vampire simulator, letting you navigate the brutal, secretive world of the undead. And the fans, they saved it. Over the years, modders put in insane amounts of work to fix the game. The unofficial patch restored cut content, fixed bugs, improved performance, and basically turned Bloodlines into the game it was always meant to be. Now it's an absolute cult classic. The atmosphere, the world building, the freedom to play as the vampire you want to be, no game has really done it the same way since. If you've never played it, get the fan patches, dive in, and experience one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Ark Survival Evolved. Ark Survival Evolved had one of the roughest launches in survival game history, but somehow it pulled itself out of the fire and became something pretty freaking awesome. When it first hit early access in 2015, the idea was insane in the best way. A survival game where you're stranded on a prehistoric island trying to stay alive while taming freaking dinosaurs. Like, come on, that sounds amazing! And when it worked, it was. But the problem? It barely worked. Ark launched as a buggy, unstable mess. Here we go again, just like Batman Arkham Knight. The performance was garbage, even on top-tier PCs. The frame rate dipped into the single digits once freaking again. Crashes were constant, and let's not even talk about the pop-in, where trees and rocks would just materialize out of nowhere. And on top of that, the grind was brutal. Gathering materials took forever, crafting felt sluggish, and if you died, which happened a lot, you lost hours of progress. It was frustrating as hell. But here's the thing, Ark never stopped evolving. Over the years, the devs kept updating, fixing, and improving everything. Performance got better, gameplay got smoother, and they added tons of new content, new maps, creatures, and even crazy sci-fi elements. And now, it's one of the deepest and most unique survival games out there. Taming dinosaurs, building bases, teaming up with friends or backstabbing them. There's nothing else quite like it. Sure, it still has some jank, but that's part of the charm. If you bounced off Ark in the early days, it's absolutely worth another shot now. Just be ready, the island doesn't take it easy on anyone. Deep Rock Galactic. Deep Rock Galactic is one of those games that went from overlooked to legendary, but its start, pretty damn rocky. When it launched in early access in 2018, people were interested, but also kinda unsure. A game about space dwarves, mining asteroids, fighting aliens, and drinking beer? Sounds cool, but would it actually be fun? And at first, it was a bit rough. The game had some solid ideas, but early on the missions felt a little repetitive, the variety wasn't there, and honestly, it lacked that one more round magic. But instead of fading away, the devs went to work. They listened to feedback, kept improving the game, and over time, Deep Rock Galactic became one of the best co-op games ever. Now the game is packed with content, the missions are way more dynamic, the different classes feel so damn good to play, and the teamwork, absolutely unmatched. Whether you're a gunner mowing down waves of alien bugs, a scout lighting up dark caves, or a driller tunneling your own freaking path through the map, everything just clicks, and the best part, the community is actually awesome. No toxic nonsense, just people having a blast. What started as a quirky little indie project turned into a co-op masterpiece. If you love working together, blasting aliens, and making bank in space, you need to check this one out. Rockin' Stone, baby. Division 1. When The Division first dropped, it was supposed to be the next big thing. A massive online shooter set in a deadly, snow-covered New York City after a virus outbreak. That's some blockbuster level stuff. It had the looks, the concept, and the promise of an open-world tactical RPG where you and your squad fought to take back the city, but when people actually got their hands on it, well, it was kind of a mess. At launch, The Division had some major problems. The enemies were absolute bullet sponges, making fights feel frustrating and weird. Like, why does some random guy in a hoodie take an entire magazine to the face and keep running? The loot system, unbalanced. The Dark Zone, which was supposed to be this intense risk-reward PvP area, turned into a playground for griefers and cheaters. And if that wasn't bad enough, server issues, weird bugs, and a total lack of good endgame content made a lot of players quit early. But once again, oh man, I missed old Ubisoft. So yeah, here's the thing. Ubisoft didn't give up. Instead of moving on, they kept working on it, dropping massive updates that fixed loot, balanced combat, and actually made the Dark Zone fun. The expansions added amazing survival-based content, and by the time it hit update 1.8, the game was almost unrecognizable from launch in a good way. And now, The Division 1 is low-key one of the best tactical shooters out there. The atmosphere is still unmatched. The gunplay is tight and satisfying, and if you get into the PvE or co-op elements, it's a freaking blast. It went from a letdown to a sleeper hit, and if you ever skipped it or gave up early, it's absolutely worth jumping back in. Kingdom Come Deliverance. Okay, so I played Kingdom Come Deliverance fairly recently, and it has become one of my favorite games, and I mention it many times in the videos as well, but oh man, the early players weren't too happy. When Kingdom Come Deliverance launched, it was ambitious as hell. A super realistic medieval RPG with no magic, no dragons, just pure historical grit. And on paper, that sounded awesome. A deep story, insane attention to detail, and a combat system that made sword fighting feel like an actual skill instead of just button mashing. But at launch, oh man, it was rough. Like tripping over your own feet while wearing armor rough, bugs were everywhere, NPCs would randomly disappear, questlines would break, and some fights felt straight up impossible because of janky mechanics. And don't even get me started on the save system. You had to drink a special potion just to save your freaking game. Imagine playing for hours, dying to some random accident, and losing all your progress. Yeah, people weren't happy. But despite all that, the game itself was freaking brilliant. The world felt real, the characters weren't just good or evil, they were complex, flawed, and actually interesting. The combat, once you got the hang of it, was one of the most satisfying swordplay systems ever. And even though it was clunky as hell at first, the devs kept improving it, patches fixed the worst bugs, mod support made it even better, and by the time the final updates rolled in, Kingdom Come Deliverance became one of the best medieval RPGs out there. It went from a broken mess to a must-play. If you love deep, story-driven RPGs where every decision matters, this game is absolutely worth your time. Just maybe mod that save system. Trust me, you'll thank me later.
Welcome, Henry.